Okay. Oh, looks like I'm live. I see myself. Look a little pale there. Hello, Brandon and Madfinger, and Jetpet and AJ. So when I set up the time for this, when I told everybody last night at the end of Dangerous Discussions I would do this, I'd completely forgotten that I often have rehearsal on Friday nights. So I've just come out of a 3-hour, hello Raksha and Robin. This came out of a 3-hour rehearsal, and getting the guy, getting packed up, saying goodnight to the guys, had time for a cigarette. And then here I am. So it was just like, oh, if I think in the future, when I do Mystic Muses, not to be confused with Mystic and the Moose, I'll do them on Saturday night because I don't have rehearsals on Saturday night. I have them usually on Friday night. Anybody? I'm Sam. Hello, Sam. So I'm just going to drink a little bit of this coffee here and, have a few people gather. I have my acoustic guitar by me. This is not really, the whole idea was, I hope they show up. There was somebody who engaged me, 2 people actually engaged me. Oh, there you are, Bryden. Christopher. I have I put the Hughes and Kettner behind me, so that's probably the one thing I will do is demonstrate it. They don't make that amp anymore. You can get it on Reverb, and they have them at pretty good prices. Hughes and Kettner is definitely a very good amp company, and there are other ones with they have multiple channels and loop effects. This is very simple. It has a simple out, one channel in, but it does have the boost on it, and the boost is a really cool feature for a small amp. It's a 5-watt amp, and one of the things I like about it is that with most tube amps, if you do not have it plugged into a load, you'll burn out your amp. This one here allows me, if I want to, there's a switch I can hit it, and they have a big enough transformer, it'll take the heat. And all Hughes and Kettners allow you to do that, because they do have XLR outputs on the back of them, so that allow you to plug into a board. So if you want to just go direct in without a speaker, all the Hughes and Kettners actually have a switch that is very unusual for a tube amp, where you don't have to have a speaker plugged in. You can do it with transistors, but you usually can't do it with tubes. But they have such massive output, their transformers are so massive that they can take the heat. So let's see, hello Genevieve, and hello Robin and Ellie. So, yeah, one of the reasons I have the Hughes and Kettner behind me is because Christopher Bryden, I'm not sure how it's said, but Christopher, he's the only Christopher in the chat right now, had asked, is that a Hughes and Kettner? And I bought it, I don't know, well, back when I had a real job, so it had to be like 2014 at least. Probably about that. That's when I kind of got a lot of my equipment. Hello, Evan, and Meandering Mystic, and Seven Serpents. I am fairly focused. I just like, from playing for 3 hours and then loading it up, and it's just like, and I've had, I think, 8 organic Numinos cookies today, but other than that, I've had no food. But the show must go on, so we'll see what kind of show it'll be. So somebody asked me about my Hughes and Kettner. That was one inspiration. And there's somebody who so far isn't here right now, and their username is Transcendental. And they had commented because the song that I had played on one of my streams was the one I wrote when I was 17. That was The Ride of Gandalf and Shadowfax. And the person who responded to me in the comment section said, shit, I'm 24 and I haven't written my own song yet. And how it would really be nice how when I get older I can say I wrote this song at 24. And we got into a conversation about just letting songs come out. Like, don't even think about trying to be original in the chords and things. And there are two. It's really interesting. I wrote a bunch of songs when I was younger, and that was one of them. I have another. I have a few songs that I think are pretty good, and that's actually one of the things I'm going to show is how, like, I have two songs that almost work. At least the one song actually works in one position for the whole song, and then another song which is still kind of getting the bridge worked out, but it's all worked in the same position. And I wanted to show some of that tonight. I'll do it on my acoustic guitar, of how when you have a groove, and that's a big part of it, and also how when you playing a guitar and you have 6 strings, sometimes playing 3 of these strings and 3 of those strings and then 3 of those strings gives you like 3 different voicings in the same position. And like I said, I'll demonstrate that in a little bit. I'm still drinking a little bit of coffee. I'm even thinking of, I've been smoking outside because it's kind of like what's on the lease, but I have my exhaust fan out, and I might actually take a little bit of a cigarette before I get into this. Okay, and I'm definitely going to be very much involved in the chat, except for when I'm playing. So Sam says, ooh. All right, Sam, I like that. Oh yeah, that bat. Yeah, that's painted in Indonesia. It's hand painted. I have a dragon downstairs that's also quite beautiful, but it broke its lower jaw off, and I have it somewhere in a plastic bag, and I have to get out the Elmers. Hello, Amanda. Yeah, bat is definitely a strong totem with me. In animal medicine, it's shamanic rebirth. And although not all bats live in caves, they live in something like a womb during the day, and so every night they reemerge from the womb, and are reborn in a symbolic way. So that's the so the medicine, the animal medicine of bat is shamanic rebirth. And it's really interesting how, again, Hollywood. And there was an interesting report from Mel Gibson, but I think I might keep that out of this one. But how, because of Dracula, bats, vampire bat is really one species of many bats. And the biggest ones, the ones that are called flying foxes, I mean, they really have cute faces. They're fruit eaters. I mean, basically, the larger bats tend to be fruit eaters. And then the smaller bats are insect eaters. They do, and they eat a lot of insects. And then you have one particular bat that's like in Central America, or certainly not in the continental United States, that does its food source is blood. And most of the time it'll be cattle. Cattle are because they're just out there in the fields in a lot of places before, when cattle were allowed to be in fields. And they still are in some places. And in places where the vampire bats do live, that's what their main meal is. They have very sharp teeth. They cut a little hole, and as the blood fills that little hole, they lap it up. They don't suck blood, they lap blood. And that's one species. I mean, there might be more, there might be a few subspecies, but I mean, the vampire bat is such a non-representative of bat. So bats get a bad name. And one of the reasons sometimes bats will, there's probably been a few people in the world out of, billions of people even 20 years ago that might have gotten a bat stuck in their hair. I bet you it was a bouffant, because back in the day there were bouffants. But one of the reasons why bats will often swoop, if a bat does swoop around your head, is because we attract insects. And so when it's sending out sonar looking for a food, if it happens, the feed, in a typical summer night, you're going to have all kinds of bugs, especially mosquitoes, and mosquitoes have 2 ways of finding you. At long stream, they follow the CO2 we exhale. So if you're out breathing somewhere and a mosquito's flying around and it gets a CO2 trail, it just follows it to its source. And as it gets closer to the source, then its infrared sight picks up, and there we are glowing for them in the dark. But bats use sonar. And so if we're out in a summer night, especially when there were still a lot of insects in the world, and attracting a bunch of mosquitoes, a big thing that the smaller bats feed on, we're going to have like this constellation. Kind of imagine like all the satellites supposedly around the Earth, but you kind of like have all these things around your head. So when a bat's sending out sonar, the area around you is full of insects. And so that's why sometimes they will dive bomb you. And if you don't move, they already have a sonar reading for you, and they will not get entangled because your head is part of their sonar reading. So they're going to swoop down, and they're excellent flyers, and they'll just pick the things off your head. But if you happen to move at the wrong time, but again, I think I don't think it's not ever. I don't think there's like never a single case, but it's like one of those things that's happened somewhere, and then it becomes an urban or a suburban or a rural myth. Hello, Christian. Yeah, you can thank Hollywood for almost every unnatural thing we think of, including the possible universe we might live in. So, music. So, yes. So one of the interesting things was I hadn't written songs for years. I had actually done most of my songwriting when I was younger. And I'm going to bring up what for some people is a controversial topic. I don't make a controversy of it because I have nothing to promote or sell. And that's the 432, tuning your A to 432 instead of 440. So I had heard about it. I'd also read about it, and I liked what I read. Because, as a metaphysician, there are certain numbers and certain geometries that are beneficial, and certain ones that are, like there's no bad numbers, but there are certain geometries that are less harmonic to the human body. So with, not even from my musician's eyes or sitting in my musician self, as a metaphysician, I did some reading and I watched a few videos about 432, and I went, you know what? I certainly like the text, or the word about it, the non-experience of it. So I decided to tune my my guitar to 432 and try it, see how it felt. This was in 2010. So I tuned my guitar to 432, and I'm just strumming it. I'm just, as simple as, I'm just like this. By the way, I'm always in 432 now. So I'm just kind of strumming. Let me make sure. I think my levels should be all right, but I haven't checked them. Yeah, they look safe. If it clips a little bit, somebody tell me. I can always turn it down. So I had tuned it up, and it's like. And one of the things I'm going to get into tonight a little bit with theory is what a half step is, so that in case anybody doesn't know what a half step is, when I say that 432 is 1/3 of a half step down from 440, you'll realize how it's really quite close. It's not like, oh, it really sounds different. It sounds subtly different, and if you didn't tell somebody, they wouldn't even know. So anyway, I tuned my guitar to 432. And I just, kind of strumming, and it just sounded so. I felt it in my body. It's like, oh, I like this, and so it's hard for me with the rhythm. It's suddenly, I'm kind of like, just strumming it, and I'm just kind of going into a trance. And the next thing I know, I'm like, songs are coming out. It's like, So it was something like that that I wrote, like in my first 432 hour, half hour, 15 minutes. And it was just kind of, it came to me, and it was like, every time, it got to the point where every time I picked up my guitar, I wrote a song. And so I now have I've probably, since 2010, I don't know, somewhere between 20, I have at least 20 new songs. And because I still have to put words to most of them. I mean, all of them have some words, because they usually kind of come with a hook, or there's something in there, and that's what I'm trying to get about songwriting. But even to this, I'm actually have to like almost stop my songwriting temporarily, because I found out the other day when I picked up my guitar and I was just, doing some stuff, a song was coming to me. So there was something about tuning to 432 that resonates with the Muses. They live within a sacred geometry. So when you're tuned to that sacred geometry, you're on their frequency. You're a match. There's a sympathetic resonance. And when you're not, there isn't a sympathetic resonance. It doesn't mean that you don't have access to Muses, but it was almost like you attract them at that tuning. And so, it just, and the other thing is, I'm a very rhythmic person. And so that's the other thing is, hello, Mari. So the other thing was between the strumming just kind of put me in a semi-trance. Excuse me. That kind of semi-trance opened up to melodies. And melodies that I hadn't heard before. And then, of course, sometimes it's like, what is the chord to that? And so one of the things that you can do is, if you can, like, if you can hum your melody, like da 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 da, and then you figure it out, whatever it is, and that's why you want to know theory, because once you get your melody, you want to figure, well, what chord might fit with that. And when you know theory, and I'm going to just, for those who don't know theory, I'm going to start just a tiny bit tonight, because when you are finding the notes in your melody, it's the chord that would fit would be one of usually 3 notes, because a basic chord structure is based on 3 notes. You can get away with 2, like there's like, those are 2-note things. So it's like a G, an A minor, a B minor, a C, and then you could get, you can also get like, so that's adding the 3rd note. So the difference between 2 notes and it's a lot richer. So anyway, when you're looking for a melody, like let's say a melody comes into your head, but you're like, what are the chords? If usually, if you can pick on a guitar and just, you just sing it to yourself, da 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 da, and you find those notes. And then once you find those notes, sometimes you might find the chord, you might have a really good ear, and sometimes what is that chord? So what the note is of the melody tells me it has to be one of 3 notes. And so for those who've never, hello Oswald. No, but I do play in Dadgad. Actually, one of my guitars, and I might tune this to Dadgad, because that alternative tunings is fun, and Dadgad is also what Kashmir is played in, the song by Led Zeppelin, Kashmir. And I have a song that I wrote in detuning, and some of it actually, from learning Kashmir, I said, oh, we can kind of do this in different modes. And for tonight, I'm probably just going to stay on my acoustic guitar, except to demonstrate the Hughes and Kettner, because I came out of rehearsal and I have time to do all the setup, and I wanted to start on time. But I think almost everybody has heard the the phrase, or do re mi fa sol la ti do. Okay, I think almost everybody knows that. That would be the building. If you don't know theory, that's your building block for theory. So in do re mi fa sol la ti do, if you do the count, you have 8 words which represent 8 notes. And if you notice, you start with do and you end with do. That's because they're the same named note. And that would be a case of like, I think I can play a major scale here. So that's a major scale, okay? But, so it's 1, 2, 3, so it's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So since do and do are the same, that means 1 and 8 are the same note, but they're an octave apart. So this is a case of that same note. Here's an A, and here's an A. So they're an octave apart, and that's why it's do, re. So, okay, so since we know that 1 and 8 are the same one, they kind of cancel each other out. And we'll just always consider, if we're playing in the key of A, that A is the 1. So okay, so now we've taken the 8s, and since 8 and 1 are the same, we have 7 notes to work with. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All chords, the basic chord, the difference, okay, like if I'm doing this, that's 2 notes. So I have my 1 note because I'm playing in G. So here's my G. So there's, and the first 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are, this is a major key now instead of a minor key. And I'll tell you the difference in a minute. And it's largely about the third, although there are other adjustments, but this is meant to be. So if you don't know theory, I want you to realize why you want to know it and how it's not that complicated. The real more complex theory gets it, but the basic theory allows you to have like a left brain part to the right brain. And I'm not one of these ones who says left is better than right. It's like having a V8 engine and saying, well, should the right side run or the left side run? It runs best when both sides are running together, and that's how our brains work best. It isn't whether should I be right brain, should I be left brain. You should be both brained. They're meant to run in sync. One will dominate over the other, depending on what you're doing, but actually sometimes when one starts to dominate, it's for the other one to catch up, and you're really functioning when they fill in. You have the detail, and then you have the big picture, and when they're operating together, you are really functioning. Hello, Mrs. Seven Serpents and Deborah. So with the theory of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, okay, so we're going to leave out the other do. So if I tell you that a basic chord is based, okay, so you're into key structure. So right now we're going to pick the G key structure. When I played the do, re, mi earlier, that was an A. But we're going to play it in G because I want to be able, it's the easiest one for me to demonstrate what I'm going to do. So if I played the whole thing, I'm going to run up the same string. Okay, so we're just going to concern ourselves with 1, 2, 3, 4. And so if we're in the key of G, and I want to make the most simple thing, it's a 1 and a 3. Hello, Lisa. So if I'm playing in G, and I know my 1, 2, 3, 4, the note I want is the 3. Because the basic chord, the most basic chord is whatever key you're in, and then what's known as the third. And it's called the third because you're playing a scale, it's the third note you would be playing in the scale. So that's why it's called the third. It's the third note. So if you wanted to know what that chord looked like in G, you would count yourself the 3, the basic chord, 1. And hopefully you know the notes on your fretboard. It really helps. And you would say, oh, so number 3 in the key of G is a B. So if I want the most basic G chord, I want a G and a B. Now what's nice about the way the guitar is laid out, and one of the reasons I picked G, is because when you tune a guitar, these always do it in fourths, but then when you come to the B string, it tunes to a third, and then it goes back to a fourth when you're tuning it to the E. And somebody just said, what did you say, 3, 4, 4? Well, again, we'll kind of get to that. So if the B is the third, and I want a basic chord in the key of G, and so that makes the G the 1, okay? Whatever key you're in, that's the 1. That's the number 1. That's your 1. And so if you want a basic chord, you need at least a third. And if you can know your scale, that's the third note in the scale. So in this case, we've identified the third note as B in G. And just so happens on the guitar that the B is an open string. So you can get that basic G chord from hitting the 2 strings. G strings are always the one that, there we go. I'm tuning old school. I have my tuner over there, but I'm doing it. So, the basic G chord is a G and a B and playing together, and you get, okay, so there's the, but a full chord has 1, the 3rd note, and the 5th note. 1, 3, 5. Those are the numbers assigned to the notes that make a real complete chord. You have a root or 1, you have a 3rd, and you have a 5th. So in G, if we count, we only counted a 4 before, but in our scale, we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that happens to be a D. Okay, so that makes it a little tricky in my open note thing, because the D would be on the B string, and I'm using the B for the 3rd. Well, it just so happens that there's a D string that's open here, and the 5 doesn't have to be like, you don't have to stack them like 1, 3, 5. That's a very nice sound. You get something. See, what would be a 1, 3, 5 thing? I get 1. What is 1? Where? I'm trying to think of a chord where it actually does 1, 3, 5 on a guitar. So since I'm blanking out from a little bit of mental exhaustion. Oh, by the way, this is a Washburn guitar. Somebody had asked me if it was a Seagull or something. It's a Washburn. I bought it like in, I don't know, I think it was like early 90s. They don't make this model. It's funny, a lot of the stuff I have in this room is no longer being made. But back to the thing. So you need the 1, 3, 5, but they don't have to stack. They just need to be present. So we've done the 1 and the 3, but we need that D. But we can't play it on the B string because we'll lose our 3rd. So we're going to hit the 5 below the G. So we go from this to this. And that's a full G chord, because it has the 1, the G, the 3, the B, and the 5, the D. But in this case, the D is below the 1, but it's still a 5. And sometimes in simple playing, like say somebody's just kind of strumming in G, and you can sometimes just create simple lines from doing just the 1s and the 3s. So you get like, and of course it helps you to, and that's, but what do you do? How do you know what those other chords are? And the thing is, if you learn the chords in your scale, then you would know, like, especially here, we're hitting a C, so when I come up, I know, and I know I want to hit an A, but then I have to hit a C, because that's the one that's in the key. And then when I hit a B, I can't hit just any old note, I want to hit the D. But then when I get to G, I can't have the same position because the D sharp or E flat note doesn't work, but the E is here. So you end up with like these kind of like, and then this one here happens to be the same kind of case. But then if you go up, you go back to this other position, and then here. Yes, I'm glad that there. I'm glad that Seven Serpents add all the metaphysics in here that anybody wants, because this is about music is magic, and that's one of the reasons why how to engage with the magic of music to be a part of our songwriting. And that's what I guess I'm going to just take a little, just in case anybody was new to theory, I'm going to let everybody's brains just take that in a minute while I talk a little bit about songwriting and not trying to make something different on purpose. If you listen to a lot of popular music, they're actually quite a lot alike. And so a lot of us beginner, including myself when I first started writing, it's like, oh, you know, like Steve Miller, he had some pretty rocking songs, but some of them were just like, oh my God, I could have written that song in my bedroom. And the answer is, and the truth is, yes, I could have, but I was too busy trying to be original. Well, Steve Miller was not afraid to use 3 chords. And the Rollins, Keith Richards, excuse me, Keith Richards basically said there's only like 3 chords in rock and roll. And in the funny thing is that one of the 3 chords of, well, you could call them the 3 chords of rock and roll would be E, A, and D. Now, what's nice about them is they go together, but only in A do you have like what we know as a 1-4-5, and a 1-4-5 is when it's almost like Louie Louie, That's known as a 1-4-5. Where your chord is based on, in this case I played in A. The fourth note in an A scale is a D, and the 5th note in an A scale is an E. So those are the chords. But that can be, in its own way, that can lock you in. So what's fun about the A, and D chords is that A, it's really the 1-4-5 of A. Because if you have as your root your A, then and I actually was just playing an A, so I could go. Same chords as I played them in bar chord earlier. So there's that kind of groove right there in A. In E, we start to get a little bluesy because we can play those same chords based in E, which I did earlier. I went, which is just E to A, and then E to D. But what makes that interesting and why it starts to get a little rocky now, rock and roll, blues influenced, is that rather than playing 1-4-5, we're playing 1-4-7. And 7, the 7th, and in this case it's a flat 7th, and I know I'm getting way ahead of you, and this will make sense later, not necessarily in this one. But the flattened 7th is known as the blues 7th. Even in major scales, the blues will generally tend to, like in words, here's a regular A scale. if you were going to do it blues, you would have the flat, you would do, and that is that blue note, which used to be called the devil's note, because playing that note in a major, it works fine in a minor, but it doesn't work well in the major. And then one of the, one of the big chords in rock music is the seventh, but it has that. So here's a regular E, and if I add the seventh to it, she gives that blues. And that was, in classical days, that was, you're invoking the devil there. Hello, Cy Borgeson. So what's fun about those basic three chords in that, which are some of the easier chords to play, because C, you're starting to bend a little bit, G, but so these are the ones that you kind of, you're in the same fretting, basically. And it's the ones that you can really write quite a bit of music from. And so if you're playing an A, you have your basic 1, 4, 5s to work with. But if you're playing an E, and that's a very popular key structure, especially in bluesy rock and roll, part of the reason why it is because they do use D, and it's an incorporation of that kind of flat the flat 7, the blues chord in the structure that gives it some groove. One song that works, let's see, Cherry Cherry by Neil Diamond was like, and that was Cherry Cherry. And so, using those same, and the thing is, it's in the key of E, and he's using that blues note, and then that little part where it kind of goes dun dun ba da dun dun da dun 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 ba da dun. I played the chords to it, and that's in A, and in which case he's getting the 1, 4, 5 out of it. So he's able to use three chords in one group. He's using them differently in E, and then when he goes into A, it gives it more of a brighter sound because now there's no blues note in that part. And then when he goes back to the chorus part, he's now the D chord, because he's in E, is now a bluesy kind of chord, as opposed to when he does the middle part in A, they're the 1, 4, 5 chords. See, that sounds nice and clean and up, but then when you go back to E, watch, I'll do it in A, where the chords all fit in a kind of like regular good classical fitting, and then when I go to E, you'll hear how it kind of blues, it gets just that hint of rock and roll, actually. So we got... or Rockin' in the USA. I might have even, again, the interesting thing is the groove of the things. Like this first song I played uses the same chords, but I don't use them in the same thing. Like the opening song I did, which is what song? Right Now is a kind of, or it's an operating title for it, but it's that one I goes. So even though it's using the same chords as Cherry Cherry, it's not using them in quite the same way, and also it's hanging on, like there's that strum of that doom, ba boom, bop, bop, ba boom. So that's the other thing, is the rhythms of it, where rocking in the US, rocking in the, let's see, I guess Cherry Cherry is. That'd be more of Neil Diamond's rhythm, where rocking in the USA is. That would be like, John Cougar, his. So there's the same chords, but they groove them differently, and they get different songs. And then, of course, they write different melodies to almost the same chords, and that's the beauty of really finding songwriting. Songwriting isn't as much about chords as it about the melody. The Stones tended to make their groove a little bit, but Mick Jagger did a pretty good job of finding the melodies in those basic chords. And so it isn't so much, you can be using the same chords over and over again with different rhythm patterns. It's the melody that you put into the chords that's where the songs are. I mean, how many instrumental songs are hits? It's the melody, because the premier instrument of all instruments is the human voice. The human voice, nothing beats the human voice. So if you remember that, and then realize that what does the human voice do? It sings melodies. So if you really get into it, that songwriting is about melody before chords, although it isn't a hard rule. But you really want decent melodies into your chords. And I think part of us that grew up, like let's say with Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne tended to sing the melody of the chords very often. Like his melody and the melody of the chord movements were very often one and the same. And that's, I think, often where we get stuck as beginning songwriters, is we'll hear a melody, but we don't necessarily know what the chords are. But I think it's a lot more interesting to allow chords to ring as long as the melody that you're singing supports them, changing the chord because the melody needs you to change the chord. And so what I'm trying to encourage is, for anybody who wants to write music, is to groove with it. Now, I really feel that if you have never tuned to 432, try it. Tune your guitar to 432 and just strum it. And see if somehow, I feel it better in my cells. One of the things I feel good about playing out with Uncle Butchie, I got to show you a picture. That's who I practice with tonight. Is that when we play out, not only are we playing some really cool music and great rhythms with a tight rhythm section, but we're singing to people's cellular structures. We're singing to their sacred geometry. So in many ways, it's kind of like a secret weapon. They might like the music, but they're gonna I think they're gonna like it even more because it's nourishing them. 440 has a dissonance with our sacred geometry. It's not a terrible dissonance, and actually I think it's because it's so close to almost being there. One has to wonder. There has been some theories that I feel are fairly supporting that 440 aggravated us a little bit more, and as the world was moving, this is because the first people who adopted the tuning were the Nazis, and then shortly after the war, the United States adopted it, and it became the international standard. And so apparently, and I think, the Nazis were going to war, so they needed people not to be, their music not to be lulling them into like, oh, I just would rather sit back and listen to music when there's a war going on. So, and also, made people want to go join the army, go out and fight. So I really see a strategy to that agitating effect of 440. It's probably one of the reasons why a lot of, and there's I think that actually that agitation is what fed some of rock and roll, some of it. Because there was an agitation, and then, after years of agitation, we went into punk. It was just like after all these, I can see a progression of how music changed after the war, and then how it just seemed to get angrier and angrier. Yeah, 432. Well, I introduced Butch to 432 when I met him. He plays banjo. And not only did he feel it, his banjo enjoyed the tuning better. And the harmonics were better for it. So, where am I here? You know something? I forgot where I am, and I'm quite sure. But I want to show a picture. I hope, see how clean it is. Okay, it looks like it's not too many fingerprints. Uncle Butchie played its first public gig a few weeks ago at a benefit, and my friends, I'm going to go to my camera so I can see what I'm doing here. And my friend's wife took a picture of us, and so I'm going to show you the picture. There we go. There's the least amount of reflection. I don't know how close I am. I mean, you should be able to pick out who I am there. That's Butch with banjo. There's a drummer in the back, and that other tall fellow, that's me. I think if I move it back, yeah, I don't. It's not. This is not a particularly good webcam, but you'll get an idea of. I didn't realize how nice the stage lighting was. So anyway, that's our first official Uncle Butchie picture, and up here you can see the name of the place is Dogtown. Okay, so I was talking about 432 tuning. So, but the other thing is, see, 432 adds up to 9, so it's a completion cycle. And it's, as Tesla said, the world is built on 3, 6s, and 9s. And 9 is kind of like, 3 and 6 kind of have their own energizing. 9 is kind of like, ooh, this is a good place to sit. Sitting in 9 is quite, there's a sense of completion. So besides the agitation from an 8, that's what 440 is. It comes out to an 8. But I think the other thing, in other words, if you notice now, people are like addicted to music. I mean, people like are playing music all the time. And which is not something people did it's not only they didn't have the they didn't have the first there was the Walkmans, now you have your iPhones or whatever, even tiny little devices that you can walk around with music. I try to stay in nature, so the last thing I want to do is drown out nature with anything else. When I come inside and I can't hear nature, music works. When I go out into nature, the last thing I want is music in my ears. And I'm a musician. But with 440 sitting at 8, so close to 9, so close to the completion number. It's not like it's adding up to 7 or 6 where it's kind of floating in there somewhere. It's almost meeting what your cells want. Your cells want it to come up to 9. So I actually think that the people who do, because again, the people who are the social engineers, they know their magic. They know their sacred geometry, because you have to know something to do something nasty with it. Technology is how you use it. And so sacred geometry is a form of technology, and some bad psychopathic actors are involved in it, and have been for a very long time. But they've really gotten organized once we got the war machines running. So by tuning to 440 or 8, besides the agitation, because it's not where you want to be, you're almost there. So that in itself is agitating. But I can't imagine why somebody asked me if I watch Gnostic media while I'm doing this, but maybe they don't think I'm reading. So I'll get to that, Oswald. where was I? Oh yeah, 8. So besides it being a little agitating, but I feel that there's actually an addictive nature to 440 tuning, because it's almost there. So there's a sense of, I think it kind of feeds where if I just listen to a little more music, I'm going to get there. And it never gets you there. If I just listen a little bit more, I'll get my nut. But it doesn't deliver, because it can't deliver at 8. It's so close to 9, it's even promising it. It almost kind of like subliminally says, a little more 8 and you'll get to 9. But you don't get to 9. And I think that the 440 tuning, part of it was to increase record sales. The whole recording industry was being born. There was a lot more, mass production of at least 78s at the time. And by creating an addictive nature to music, by not quite getting you there, it was good for record sales. So that's my sense of that. Maybe the Nazis did it to kind of irritate, but I think that certain people looking at it go, well, not only irritate, but it's like people will want more, because the general thing is if 1x doesn't satisfy you, 2x should get the job done. If 2x doesn't, we'll go for 3x, right? And I really think that a big part of 440 tuning is to sell music, and of course keep you agitated. So now let's say I'm joining, I actually pretty much know who tunes in 432. I played with a guitar player last summer, and he's in the band, and they all play in 432. So it makes it so when I had to go play with them, when they wanted a bass player to fill in, I took the gig because I knew I'd be playing in 432. I probably wouldn't take a gig at 440. I'd sit in at a jam and tune up to 440 just to jam. But it's almost like we, the musicians, we, the ones making the music, can bring it back to wholesomeness, or we can just say I like it this way. Fuck 432. And I've had people tell me that, that's just crap. Although they'll tune down to D. I mean, there's a strange resistance. So that's why I won't argue it. I will certainly extol its virtues. I play. That's the only thing I tune my instruments to. But I would recommend anybody who hasn't tried it, don't try it because it's right. Try it to try it. Just try it to try it. And if you have been frustrated with songwriting, just kind of strum at it a little bit and see if all of a sudden you don't start hearing things that you weren't hearing before, that now you have to figure out how to play them because they're going through your head. Hello, Blue Blood. So anyway, when we were talking about and the tuning is, well, I'll just use my guitar. There's something called half steps. On a piano, it's each note next to them, and the same thing on a guitar. Every note, whether it's in a key or not, the difference between one fret and the other is a half step. Okay. Those are all half steps. The difference between so in other words, this note to this note is one half step. And there is a way they break down half steps into a smaller subdivision. They call them cents. It's almost like a half step is $1. And so they break it into pennies. So the difference between 440 and 432 isn't a half step, it's 32 cents. Or if it was 33, it'd be, a complete third, 1/3. So basically, it's slightly less than 1/3 of a half step flatter. I mean, it's really, really subtle. Because again, you're going from, 8. to 9, but it's funny you're dropping down. That's why you have to kind of go down a little bit. You could go up to 441, but at 441, then the numbers don't double as well. It's a weird number. You really like even numbers. 441 is an odd number, even though it adds up to 9. So, and since A is kind of like the basis, the other ones then stack very, very nicely in sacred geometry. And that let me say, you know, Mad Finger, one of the videos I saw on 432 is somebody saying that since orchestras started tuning to 440, and that's who plays for opera singers have shorter careers since 440 tuning began. And it makes sense because our body is constructed in sacred geometry. So our vocal cords are meant to reproduce within sacred geometry. So it isn't even that it's just this tiny bit sharper. It's only a 1/3 of a half step sharper. It is. I don't really even think it's the pitch increase that's giving them shorter careers. It's the fact that they're using a piece of sacred geometry, their vocal cords, to put a dissonant frequency through. And it's that dissonance that creates wear and tear. There's a wobble, you know. When you have dissonance, the two frequencies, if you know, like a 1 and a third, they marry very nicely. Where if you do like flat 5s, okay, so here's like a regular 1/5, okay? There's two notes and they kind of almost act as one. Now this is a half step rather than 1/3 of a half step, so you'll hear it, okay? Hear that dissonance? Now, of course, in some music, it's like, oh, that's cool, man. You know, the flat 5 is, you know, part of modern music that likes dissonance. And there is a place for it, for sure, for sure. That's why there's diminished chords. But, so when you hear this, there's that wobble between them, as opposed to this, where they, you know, they sing together. So I really believe that the human voice singing at 440 is using notes that have a dissonance with the actual cellular structure of our bodies, and specifically the vocal cords. And that's why they have shorter careers, because there's wear and tear on the tissue from that dissonance, as opposed to it just like resonating together and there's no wear and tear. The body, it just, you know, it works. So there's some things to, you know, to consider of why we might want to use 432, this tiny 1/3 of a half step difference. And for me, it's also being part of reclaiming what has been stolen from us over the centuries, in this case, just a few decades ago. I mean, if you were playing in the 1930s, you might be not just be playing in 432, because it might not have been as hard. When they made 440, but it was called Verdi's A. 432 was always found to really work well. And it has a sacred geometry. It's part of the music of the spheres. 440 is not of the music of the spheres, and that's why the moment I changed my tuning in 2010, as soon as I started strumming, if I just fell into a rhythm, melodies came. Hello, Owl Walk. So I feel there is a wholesome reason to at least experiment with 432, because it'll be a little bit easier for you to sing. If you're not a strong singer like I'm not, at least I'm using my vocal cords in an optimal situation, as opposed to a dissonant one, and I'm already having little pitch problems because I'm not, you know, I haven't trained my voice to be really good on pitch. But by at least allowing my voice to be a natural instrument by singing in singing in resonance with sacred geometry, it produces better effects. So any people who are out there and you know they've been playing, and I mean now when you have a regular piano, that becomes kind of tricky. It's not that they can't be tuned that way, but a lot of times the piano tuners themselves might resist you. I mean, they have you know, and also a lot of times they have the tuning forks, so they have 440 tuning forks, so they have to go out and get a whole set of tuning forks. But I think most modern players are, you know, use the equivalent of that we all use now is digital, where you can dial it in. I have a $125 Yamaha keyboard that I can play in 432 because you hit the thing and it's, you know, the default setting is 440, and you hit the down button 8 times and you end up at 432, and you hit save, and now my keyboard, now my little $125 Yamaha keyboard is in 432. Okay, a diminished chord. Okay, the basic structure of a chord, you know, when you is 1, 3, 5, and they're all majors. So I'm going to play them as single notes, and I'll play them in C. Okay. Okay, so that's 1. So that's, you know, do, re, mi, fa, so. See, I was flat there. So is the 5, and we do, re, mi is the 3. So we got the 1. A diminished chord is something that does something very strange. And now a diminished chord works with 4 notes, because a diminished chord is kind of working off of a 7th chord. So if you're going to diminish your chord, you have an E, you're going to want a flat 5. Well, see, this is the beauty of a diminished chords. I'm going to show everybody a position for diminished chords. Okay. And it looks like a D, but it covers 4 strings, and it's an alternate. You have your first finger in the 2nd fret in this case, your 3rd finger is in the 3rd fret, your 2nd finger is in the 2nd fret, and your 4th finger is in the 3rd fret. It's kind of staggered. This, that, this, that. And a diminished chord is based on the root, whatever. If it's a D, like this is a, what is this? This is an E. This is an E diminished. Actually, it's, and that's gonna. I'll call this E diminished because that's the low note. So there's the E, and then what we do in a diminished chord is we flatten the 3rd. Which here's my G is a 3rd, so a regular E, a regular 3rd is G sharp, so we have a G. The 3rd gets flattened, the 5th gets flattened. Here's the B flat, and the normal, what's normally a flat 7th, but in this case that's why it's based on a 7th chord. The 7th, or the dominant 7th, instead of the regular major 7th, gets flattened. So actually, in many ways, it's a 6th. But a diminished chord is you flat the 3, you flat the 5, and you flat the 7. Now, the interesting thing about a diminished chord, and this is a beautiful thing, because if you know one diminished chord, if you teach yourself the fingering of one diminished chord, you now know 4 diminished chords. Because the relationship of the notes in a diminished chord is that, let's say we were going to say this is a B flat. Well, the relationship of the other 3 notes is that they happen to be the flat 3, the flat 5, and the flat 7 of B flat. In C sharp, the other 3 notes happen to stack the same way. So when I play an E flat diminished chord, it's also a B flat diminished chord, or a C sharp diminished chord, or a G diminished chord. But the thing is, say, well, it's hard to remember all those notes. Yeah, it is. So that's why if you learn this one diminished position and just know your notes on your D chord where your first finger is, then if your first finger is on E flat, it's an E flat diminished. That's an E diminished, an F diminished, an F sharp diminished. And so that's what a diminished chord is, okay? It's a 1, a flat 3, a flat 5, and what they call a flat 7. And it's a little bit weird because the dominant 7th is really already a flattened major 7th. So they call it a flat 7. I consider it kind of a major 6th. Again, but that, if you were just, and then, so, and also, like, if you were a bass player, the position, so it's just like you stack, again, you have there's your flat 3rd, here's your flat 5, and then up. And so the relationship basically in a diminished chord is every note is 3 half steps away from each other. Here's an A, so there's 1, 2, 3, and there's the next note. Then we have 1, 2, 3 is the next note, and then 1, 2, 3 is the next note. So diminished chords work like that. And let me grab my pick here for a second. I remember, and they kind of have that weird feeling. And I had a song that I wrote in F. I'm not going to do much of it, but it was based on running a diminished progression. So I played in F. So it'll be an F. So F, A flat, and B, and you get something like this. And so if you want to get, like, okay, you got those 3. And so if you want to, oh, I want a 4th chord, go up to the other diminished position, which is a D. So you could get like. And in this case, I'm not playing the full diminished. I'm just playing the flat 5 and the flat 3. And it's very dissonant. Yeah, well, that's what it is. It's actually, I call it the anxiety song. And it's and even the rhythm, that dum pa dum pa dum dum, it's meant to, like, you know. So even when it resolves, it doesn't give it up. Like, it sounds like it's about to resolve because you have all this, you know, like. But even when it resolves in anxiety. Yeah, it was when I originally conceived it. I wanted to, and it wasn't even a song with a whole lot of melody. And it was people who, let's say, live the achiever's and consumer's life. And it was just I was just gonna kind of just do that, and so you have, your summer house and your co-op in Manhattan, and you got your boat, and and you got this, and but then there's the downsides to owning all that. So that's what that song was kind of gonna, like, telling, kind of peeling back some of the ugliness of the keeping up with the Jones consumer, who's got the biggest salary kind of game, and to that. Sure. Brandon wants me to hit it from an E chord to an E diminished, so I'm going to do it. It's funny, I'm not that well. Oh. I don't play many diminished chords, so I don't have the muscle memory, but I'll do my, so here's the E. So you can see that's a nice transition chord because it creates that tension. It's almost like you're going from E. It's like, oh, where are we going to go from there? You can go almost, from a diminished chord, you can go a lot of places because it's almost like, ooh, let's go somewhere. Even in my song, the one that goes, the what I call the "Go to Your Room" song. Right now, because I'm tired, my voice is, I'm lucky I can speak. So trying to sing will be for another time. But I'll play the chords. So it's like. a seventh there. So that D seventh could probably be played as a diminished chord too, because I think it's actually what it's trying. It almost wants to be a diminished chord, but I prefer the D seventh. And you can play a D. Matter of fact, I'll play that same passage. I'll play it with the D, and you'll see it fits. Let's see, do I have to? It might fit even better if I. Let's see. So it's kind of like, let's see. We've seen your work for thousands of years. Earth doesn't like you, and it's pretty clear. You need to leave the stage now. We've had quite enough. So go to your room. Well, that chord progression is like a lot of chord progressions. You know, that's actually a progression for a lot of songs. C, A minor, D minor, G. And so that when I went, so I'm going to play now without the singing. So it's. Okay, so you'll see how it kind of goes up there. It's because it's climbing, because it's an F chord. F sharp isn't in that key structure, but because it's a chromatic, it's up one. When you melodies often will get away with breaking the key structure when you do chromatic. So the first one is so we have C, C7, F, then the D. But I'm going to play it with the D7, and you tell me which one sounds better. Right? Don't you think that 7 sounds better? I mean, they both work because the note that I'm singing is the F sharp. So a D has the F sharp in it, so it's giving me the chord that'll support the melody. But the D7th has that little ring into it, and also it is in the key of C, and the D7th has a C in it instead of the D, which is, you know, so but I'm still getting that F sharp. And the most important thing is I want an F sharp in there. And an F sharp minor chord probably wouldn't work very well. No, not at all. So those little nuances, and you use your ear for it. I mean, if I'm singing and I was up on stage, you know, most people probably wouldn't notice if I used a D or a D7th, but I'm going to play them back to back, and you just hear the difference. Okay, or. So again, either one works. I like the 7th because you know, we're also, you know, we're telling people to go to their room, so I want a little bit of to it. Oh, do have a little bit of a stiff neck. So excuse me while I do my stretches. I'm quite sure I wasn't watching the camera. Instead, I'm stretching and doing other things. Yeah, I'm seeing myself stretch now. Yeah, I made faces. I'm used to stretching unobserved. Okay, so Christopher, are you still here? Because you're the one who showed some interest in the Hughes and Kettner amp. It's not like I won't do it, because I think it's a cool little amp, and I'd be glad to demonstrate it. And for that, I will need to put on my I'll pick my Telecaster. Let me make sure it's tuned. So my tuner's on my bass. And before I turn it on, I'll just kind of tune it quietly. This is a nice tuner. I mean, I'm going to put on my camera so everybody can see. This is Snark. And so I turn it on. And then on the back, there's these buttons. And the round button is to put it in select mode, then you go up or down. So this is normally, right now it's default setting at 440. So when I hit that round button, there. When I hit that round button, there we go. It highlights the 440 there. And then I hit my down button, and it will drop it to 432. Did I get there? That's 437. I can't see it in the camera. 435, 434. Okay, so now we're at 432. And then I clip it on here. And like I said, I'm not plugged in because I don't... Well, so far, pretty good. Tuned it up last night, so it's kind of holding its tune. This is a really nice guitar, this Stratocaster. American Special. Well, D was a little flat. A is good. E's a little flat. Alright. Alright. And I'm going to need to put... This is the strap that came with it, a nice little Fender strap. My snazzy strap I keep on my bass. But this strap is very comfortable. It's got nice padding. Come on. Okay. So, right now, I'm plugged in. That's my Super Champ. You really, you don't need to see the Super Champ so much because it's going to be the Hughes and Kettner that I put on. And I will turn it on. Oh, why isn't it on? There we go. And I like this amp has tubes in it. It's a tube amp, but it has a lot of it's also a modular amp, and I do like it because it has something called vibroverb in it, which is something like a Leslie, and it's different than a phase shifter. It's different than a phase shifter, and it's different than a flange. To me, it's a rounder sound, and there's a little button here, and the setting is a little slow, so I just hit it a little quicker. And now it goes there, and if I turn down the intensity, it'll turn it off completely. Turn my volume down a little bit. And then I could put it on a little bit here coming in, but I like to keep it around 6. And actually my speed's a little faster than I usually keep it. There we go. Speed is important because there's the intensity and the speed. There we go. That's nice. That's the ring I like. Let me get my pick. Different sound. And what's nice about the Telly is it has 2 pickups and then a switch. Right now I'm playing with both of them. So this is like the 2 of them combined. This is the bridge, or nicer, rounder sound. But most people buy Tellys is this back pickup. That bite. And it is a nice sound, but sometimes, certain songs I play, that's not, I want something more mellow, so I keep it in between. And if I want it more mellow, I go to the first pickup. So that's the Super Champ. Very nice. It's really a nice amp. But this is about the Hughes and Kettner. So we're going to plug into that one. Unfortunately, I lose that flange sound. I do have something that can duplicate it, but I don't want to plug that in. Okay, so this is... Let me move this a little out of the way because my Hughes and Kettner is plugged into that back speaker. By the way, they're all Weber speakers here. And And that's one of the reasons why, even though I'm in that, the same as what sounded deeper on this amp, this is an American voice speaker, and that one's a British voice speaker, and the British voice speakers have a brightness to them. It's one of the reasons I like them. So this is the little Husey Kettner. It's basically set on flat, but I have a little of the bass rolled off. I'll put the bass right in the middle, so everything's kind of flat there. And it's got a master and a gain. So right now it's in the clean mode, but if I turn up my gain, I can get a little bit of bite to it. But it's probably overdriving the speaker. But what's really nice, I can lower this. It's got a drive, and this. So actually, I'm going to demonstrate something that I was saying about finger positioning. I'm going to just make sure, I'm going to check in there. Okay, whoever's leaving, see, I'm going to be closing out in a little bit, but I did say I wanted to show about making a song in a single finger position. So, what I'm doing first, I'll get this up, and I'll put on my treble pickup, so it has a nice bite to it. So I wrote a song, this one I wrote about 19, and it's called Marijuana, but I'm kind of going to make it, I think, a hemp song. And it's an interesting fingering for, because this is a G minor chord in the bass, in a bar chord. Well, actually G minor 7th, this is G minor. And this is G minor 7th. I do an interesting way of playing my G minor where I put because I want this is, so that's my 1 and my flat 3, and then I take my pinky and I put it across these, which is another G minor chord all by itself, and so the full chord, this G minor, is like this. But it's actually kind of hard to hold in that position, but it doesn't matter because I actually use it to get at least 3 or 4 chords out of the same position. So the opening part of this song, and then I'm going to put in the drive, because then you'll hear like, ooh, that drive is nice. But it's kind of got this. It's got 2 grooves. It's got a chorus groove and a verse groove. But the opening is kind of like the chorus groove. So it's so I'm getting that sound where I'm getting like this kind of G. It's kind of a, because I got the G bass. So it's kind of a dark voiced G minor. Then I'm going to this, and I'm not using the G so much, so it's a B flat chord. That's a B flat chord there. The full B flat would be like this. But I have 4 notes, which is 1 note more than I need for a chord. So that's a B flat chord. And then I have this final swipe, which is a G minor chord on its own. So I'm kind of alternating between kind of like a lower voiced G minor, a B flat, into another G minor, like this. Actually, I'll play the chorus structure because that's where I really use it. I mean the verse structure. So technically it's G minor, G minor, B flat, G minor, G minor, G minor, but in a different voicing. And I don't, other than rolling my hand around up here to mute strings, so I'm making sure these strings don't ring in case I get sloppy, but a lot of it's in the picking hand where even if you don't mute, you're not playing those strings. So I'm hitting like 4 strings here. So, and then and then I'm hitting like 4 strings here, getting that B flat, and then 4 strings there. And those are the two I have, you know, that's the chorus part I did, and the other part is the verse. And so, again, I'm getting the same position, the same basic chords, and I'm creating a verse and a chorus structure by the verse being. So it's that groove. Dum, bum, 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 bum. But the chorus is this one. Okay. Now, so now I just want to show like how I wrote a song. I mean, it goes in some chorus parts where it kind of goes through like a. And then it has more chords in it, and all the chords, because it's in a minor. Then I go into an A minor. Then I go up to an E minor. And then the end is like. So it's like a little pull there, and it's every chord I play is the exact same position. I'm used to playing in my lap, so if I'm a little sloppy, it's what it is. Anyway, but this song needs some dirt. So there's two ways. One, in this amp, I do have a nice distortion pedal. But in this case, I hit drive. Better turn it down because I do have neighbors watching. I mean, roomies. But I end up with this sound. And since it's a gritty song, I want a gritty sound. And the song starts off with, was it like a... So that's why I like that kind of gritty tone. Now I could plug it back in to my other amp. And one of the things, I have some pedals that, I didn't plug my pedals in, never mind. So anyway, that's the Hughes and Kettner demonstration. I realize I have turn the volume down, which is always recommended. Come back to the mic and see how everybody's doing the live chat. I'm getting ready to wind this down. I was kind of like, I feel, you know, it's 2 hours. When I first started, I thought, man, I'll make it an hour tonight. So, yeah, that's a nice distortion. But the next time I have a dark, I can certainly show it. TC Electronics makes really a lot of good pedals that are affordable. And this one, when it first came out, was like $150. They're selling it for $50 these days. And it gives a really nice tone. And what I like about it is the gain is what gives you the kind of the dirt, but the level allows you to, like when you kick it on, to keep the exact, I can dial in as much dirt as I want. I can get it saturated, and the higher the level is, the less I need to saturate the gain. But at a level that I could speak over, I can have total saturation if I put my gain up all the way and then back the level off. The other nice thing about this pedal is it has a bass and treble control, as opposed to a lot of distortion pedals that have a tone control. And it's kind of the normal thing where it's working on a resistor. So depending on how you use it, it rolls off certain things or allows things to pass through the frequency. This isn't based that. This is actually active parametric equalization, where in the middle they're actually locked in a little bit. It's a flat setting. So the very sound that you're getting from your guitar, no color at all in this setting. But as you're listening to it and then you put that dirt on, you might go a little fatter, in which case, or it's too fat. And so because this is parametric equalization, when you go backwards on the bass, you're actually actively rolling the bass out, not just filtering it in the way that normal resistors do. But if you're happy and you think the bass is good, but it's too bright, you can roll back the treble. Or if you want more bite, you can roll up the treble. This pedal, I mean, when this is like a demonstration in itself, how great a dirt pedal is. It's called Dark Matter Distortion by TC Electronics. Incredible pedal. There's another one, Mojo Mojo. The Mojo Mojo isn't as saturated. It's almost like a soul food, dirty kind of sound. This just really saturates. This pedal sounds great, and if it was plugged in, I would have demonstrated it through my other amp. So, hello Specul. Hello Niche. I hadn't seen you. Did you, Chris? I hope you got a chance to see the Hughes and Kettner doing its thing. And again, that little 5-watt is no longer sold new, but they sell them on Reverb.com. I saw them for like $275. I paid $300 or $350 for it. I forget. Yeah, this pedal is awesome. I mean, this is such a sweet pedal because you can get the deepest, richest saturation at a complete bedroom level by just, you know, like if you have your level up, you might need less gain. But as you turn your level down, you start losing that saturation. You can turn the gain up, and you can have the richest, fattest sound at bedroom. I mean, and I do mean bedroom level. An acoustic guitar would drown it out. And I mean acoustic guitar being strummed, you know, not hammered. Just if you was doing a regular strumming, you can get super saturated sounds that are lower than an acoustic guitar. This is such an incredible pedal, and it's $50 or dollars. So this was my first attempt at doing a music-themed live stream, Mystic Muse. So before I'll spend a few more minutes here. How did it go for everybody? Let's see, I got 22 people here. How did people like the way I did it? I mean, it was not structured. It was just me talking music, some theory, some demonstration, playing some music. Did you listeners out there enjoy the show? Was it cool? Was it a little informative? Was it fun? Oh, good. That's good feedback. So again, the Friday night was a rough night for me because I came in like, oh man, I just played for 3 hours and I still haven't eaten. I've had cookies at around 3 o'clock this afternoon, so I am a little hungry. And so I think Saturday night might be a better. That's when Lawrence Welk was on. And so I think Saturday, and that way I won't have to be saying goodbye to the guys and then coming in here and setting up equipment, because I would have had all my pedals plugged in. I would have had everything prepared. When I scheduled it, and then I even had to call them. I called Butch up. I go, "Are you guys coming over tonight?" "Oh yeah." I called Mark. He's picking me up at 5. Well, how about somebody give me a call? I mean, I kind of had a sense. That's why I called. It's like, don't leave everything to telepathy, guys. Lawrence Welk had some pretty darn good musicians in it, and Butch Butch has something I don't have, which is he can like hear like things and find a chord. He could pick the notes out. I can sometimes have to ask what key is it in. If they gave me some time and somebody doesn't mind a few wrong notes, I'll get there, within reason. Sometimes very quickly. He can kind of just listen and maybe hit one note and then go, oh, that note's wrong. It's this note, because he'll hear the relation of the note he played to where he has to go. I might have to bounce around a little bit. And he told me he did his ear training listening to Lawrence Welk. He just kind of, found out what keys they were and just started listening, and he'd identify what it sounded like on his banjo. So he has this real sense. He's not quite, it's, I guess, the closest thing to perfect pitch, where if you don't nail it, the first note that you hit, it will pretty much kind of go, oh, that's sharp by a third, or it's not even that you think so much in a number, you go like, oh, I'm sharp by this much, kind of like in your ear, and you do that much and you're there. Or maybe now you went just a little bit too far, or you're almost there, and in your third note, by sure you're there. So again, so this is Mystic Muse, not to be confused with Mystic and the Moose, which will be around, a little bit before, around the middle of the month. The new moon is the 13th, so and that's on a Wednesday night. We might be able to make it work on the new moon. So, but it's to be announced, and so, and then I realized, Mystic and the Moose and Mystic Muse sound a lot like each other, but they're spelled different, and they're very different things. And then, it was interesting. Originally, I was going to kind of start this out with my credentials, who I've played with. I'll say that another time, because I have some names to drop, being around for so long, and having grown up in the Bronx and played with Ace Frehley before he was in Kiss. And for those who were not here earlier, I'm going to show the picture of Uncle Butchie that I showed everybody earlier before everybody got here. So, and this was at playing at Dogtown, which is the local kind of venue around here. And like I said, if I move it real close, you really lose it. But it's about the best I can do with it. So I think everybody might be able to pick out who Butch, the banjo player, is. Our drummer's hidden behind his drums, like most drummers are. And then that tall fellow on the other side of the stage is me. And I mean, in one of the bands I was with, one of the drummers we auditioned, it was a band named Gizmo. We had the drummer from the New York Dolls audition for the band. And then there's Peter Tork. But there's like, there's little stories that go with them. So I'll tell the stories instead of just drop the names. So this was like, it looks like it was not quite an hour and 40 minutes. I'm certainly ready for a cigarette. And usually most people who are here have watched my. Well, I guess I can do. I think I still have it loaded. So, but I think everybody saw it the other day. It was me and Tori Amos. Do I have it here? Oh, there it is. So yeah, I love Tori Amos, and this is before she didn't have. This is when she played solo. The best Tori Amos was when it was just her and a piano on stage. The absolute best. And she was playing at a relatively small theater in Albany, around by Albany, New York. And I waited at the end of the line to be the last person, because I had gotten a backstage pass, and I decided I'll be the last. And this is this is the picture. This will be a second time for other people, but that's me back in about 1991, I'll say, 92 perhaps. And that's Tori Amos holding on to my arm, posing real sweet for the picture for me. What a sweetie! And look, if you might notice, if you look on her shoulder, you'll see like that there's a little bit of a where there's like the black discontinues. That's a ripped shirt she's wearing. She's wearing jeans and a ripped shirt. Very, very cool. Yeah, she was quite lovely, and after me, she was out of the building, and like within 5 minutes after that. Well, that was back in my brown hair days. I'm sitting here looking at it like, my God, look. I mean, there's still some brown hair in there, but when I wash my hair, it often, I mean, I'm going to let my hair out, because that's where the brown hair is. Somewhere. Let me see. I gotta look at my camera. Maybe it disappeared in the shampoo. Where's it? There we go. Back here. There's the brown. There we go. So anyway, thank you all for spending this Friday later evening. Well, I guess those on the West Coast, it's not even 9 o'clock your time, so you spent your evening with me. And for those on the East Coast, you spent your later evening with me. And those in Australia, I don't know. I have no idea what the time reference is. You can tell me. I'd be genuinely interested, because that way any of my Australian listeners, when they are here, and I'm usually doing it about the same time, I have an idea of where they are. Yeah, so like Niche is out in the West Coast zone, and so it's 8:13 for her. Okay, so you're a day ahead, and you're in the afternoon. Oh, all right. So in many ways, I can think, okay, it's kind of like the reverse and 2 hours ahead. So because I'm at 11:13 p.m., you're at 1:13 p.m. You know, but it's obviously you've gone through your morning, and now you're a little bit past noon. After a few shows, I'll probably hard code. So thank you, Blue Bud, Sam Webster, Mrs. Seven Serpents, Ellie, I'll Walk, Christian Martin, Niche, Brandon Young, Mad Finger, Deborah Gell, if they're still here, Mari, I think Mari said goodnight, and there was Christopher, Cy, Christian, I'll Walk. All right, I think I've gotten it. I think Soul Traveler. Don't want to forget you, Soul Traveler. Definitely don't want to forget you. Blue Blood Jam. Lisa Gray. Oswald Spengler. All right. I think I did. I think I went through there. Probably be a lot easier if I just went into the participants. But I didn't want to just think, you know, sometimes if somebody left and then came back and didn't put anything in the chat, their name wouldn't be in the participants. Participants shows who's active, and I didn't want to miss anybody, even if they're lurking. Lurking is fine. So that's going to be it for the first Mystic Muse. Maybe I'll start numbering them. We'll see. I can always do it after the fact. And thank you all for joining me. And I'm going to go into my camera. I'm going to hit stop streaming, which I